you again. It's Mary Ellen, as I like to say, your friendly neighborhood fundraiser. And today, of course, we are talking about capital campaigns in our Humanities Arkansas Fundraising Friday series. And as you can see, this is the seventh of our out of 6 sessions we've done so far. So we have been making really good progress and kind of creating a whole picture for small to mid-sized humanities nonprofits on what we can do in the fundraising area. Again, today we're focusing on capital campaigns. Some of you may be ready for a campaign. Some of you may have had one already. Some of you may be just thinking about, is a capital campaign something we might want to do? So we are going to take that deep dive into capital campaigns today. So of course, our goals are always pretty much the same, right? We're always just trying to learn basic terminology and key terms. So when we engage with our nonprofit community or stakeholders, other fundraisers, we have similar shared terms about capital campaigns. We're going to go fast as always, but here's the good news. Miss Adrian has all of these slides PDF for you, even in the video. And my goal for you is to have 1 or 2 really big takeaways from today. That's the goal, is to have those 1 or 2 really big takeaways. And then of course, it's my joke always, we want to keep the fun and fundraising. Because when you lose that fun, you lose the energy, you lose the synergy, you lose the power of cohesive fundraising efforts. So let's just relax and take this deep dive into capital campaigns and see what magic we can do. So as we have started every session, we talked about fundraising last year in the United States, roughly $499 billion. Now, these stats come out in mid to late June every year, so we are waiting any day now to get the Giving 2024 report, which will show all data from fundraising in 2023. So hopefully by our final session in August, these numbers will be updated. So just thinking about, again, where are different constituencies giving? Individuals are giving roughly 64% in outright gifts. Foundations are giving about 21%. Giving by bequests, again, which is also individuals, 9%. And then, of course, corporations are giving that 6%. So if you notice, if you combine the giving by individuals, the outright giving, and the bequest, individuals give 73% of the money away each year, basically, right? That's a huge amount. That's 73% of that $499 billion. So some basic terms and ideas we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about what's a campaign. You may have heard the term case statement thrown around a lot, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Feasibility study. This one puzzles people, so we're going to spend just a teeny bit of time talking about what's a feasibility study. And then we're going to talk about the 2 main core components of that large capital campaign, the quiet phase and the public phase. So what is a capital campaign, right? What is a campaign? You've heard this. Of course, historically, we know this comes from the term capital because it originally was designed to help nonprofits build, construction, create capital projects, right? But overall, a capital campaign is simply a concentrated effort in fundraising for a specific period of time, typically 3 to 5 years, that sets a very specific dollar goal and is really connected to a particular goal or a particular vision of the nonprofit. In general, as I said, the most common is for new construction or endowment, right? And look, we have our little penguin here doing the construction for us. But here's one thing to think about. In a sense, there are 2 kinds of capital campaigns. And this is all about how are we going to count our money over those 3 to 5 years. A restricted campaign, right, would be more so like this just new construction. So a restricted campaign is going to count new money that comes into the nonprofit during that 3 to 5 year period only for that particular project. Only for that particular project. So your campaign numbers and your annual fund and your annual fundraising totals, right, will be different. A comprehensive campaign counts all donations to the nonprofit during a specific period of time. So all donations, whether it's to that particular vision or not, it's counted towards that overall goal. That's going to be up to your organization and how you want to count the money. And if you want, in the Q&A, we can talk about strategies for choosing one of these. There's a lot of capital campaign fundraising advice out there. A lot. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, I like formulas. You guys know that already about me, right? I like simple, clear formulas. So here in my roughly 22 years of fundraising, this is how I break it down. What is needed in a campaign? You need a vision, right? You need a vision from the nonprofit leader and board. You need a shared vision between the nonprofit leader and the board. You need a constituency, a group of donors who have the resources to make that contribution to fulfill that vision. And you need a plan, right? And that equals success. That's where we get the flying dollar bills at the end here. So again, what is my basic formula? We need a vision. We need a donor constituency. We can't have them imagined. We can't say, oh, maybe they'll be there or we'll develop them along the way. Existing donor constituency to support that vision, and then the action plan. I have found if you have all three of these things, it puts you on a success pathway. Stumbling blocks occur when your campaign is missing one of these key elements, right? Stumbling blocks occur as your vision is vague. Your vision, maybe the board's not buying into your vision. Maybe the nonprofit leader's vision, maybe the board is pressuring for a campaign, but the vision becomes a little wishy-washy, right? We're going to improve things. That's our vision. Constituency, you can fail very easily here if you start to think of wishful fundraising, where you think the donors will magically come if my vision is big enough. Some people think it will happen that way. It's just not been in my experience. I like to see a solid constituency already existing to support that vision through contributions. And then, of course, the action plan. If you don't have a plan, if you don't know step by step what you're doing in general each quarter or each year in that 3 to 5 year progress, you can get a little lost and sometime misdirected. So we need all of those core things. So keep that in mind. Everything we say after this is just going to be the nuts and bolts of this little formula. So I love this graphic. This is from Donorly, right? I have no affiliation with Donorly. This is not even an endorsement for them. I just love this graphic they have because it makes phases of a nonprofit or capital campaign so clear to us, right? We have basically these 5 stages of a capital campaign. We have a planning phase, we have a quiet phase, we have a kickoff phase, we have a public phase, and then we are complete. So we're going to talk a little bit about these. These would be considered best practices or the most common ways of classifying stages in a nonprofit capital campaign. So in the planning phase, right? In general, since you're looking at a 3 to 5 year effort, in the planning phase, you're going to do things like establish that vision. Set the dollar goal to make that vision happen, right? Set a timeline. Are we going to go 3 years? Are we going to go 5? I've seen some really large organizations, some really large institutions that are doing multi-billion-dollar campaigns. That happens at some large institutions like large children's hospitals or large universities like Stanford. I've seen some university campaigns go as long as 7 years, but in general, the best practice standards, that 3 to 5 year time period. So you're going to start setting that timeline, right? In that initial planning. You're going to need to evaluate not just your donor records, but your donor records software system. Campaigns involve a lot of donor contacts and then gifts paid over several years. So you need to think about your donor software before you begin, right? If you're just working on an Excel spreadsheet, might it be time to invest in an organized donor software program? Right? Those are the things to think about. Or let's say your donor software program is good for maybe 20,000 constituents, but your campaign is going to expand that and you're looking at expanding that maybe into the $30,000 constituency range, that 30,000 constituency number range. And you might need to upgrade that software. So these are just some things to think about. That's a hidden cost sometimes that people forget, that donor record software. A gift acceptance policy, is basically answering the question, what kinds of gifts are we going to accept for this large fundraising effort? So are we going to accept, our annual fund gifts going to count? Are we only going to count major gifts? Are we only going to count cash gifts or gifts of securities where we have outright funding? Are we going to count pledges? Are we going to count planned gifts like trusts and bequests? Or gifts of life insurance? These are some all really, really good things to think about. So, for example, if you have a construction project and you need $2 million to start that construction for your capital campaign, and your goal is to have that $2 million in cash in the bank account at the end of the campaign, planned gifts may not be that tool for you, because the planned gift is not going to give you money immediately. Remember, planned, right? We get that money later on. So just some things to think about. What kinds of gifts are you going to accept for this capital campaign? In general, you want to complete a feasibility study. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. That's one of our key terms. And in this initial planning phase, we want to establish our volunteer campaign committee. It's traditional, really since the 70s, 80s, and huge in the 90s, that we used, as fundraising professionals and nonprofit professionals, volunteers to help us organize, plan, and solicit gifts for our capital campaign. So you want to think about, who were those volunteers? Some people call them the campaign cabinet. Some people call them the campaign committee, right? But it's usually a group made up of leadership from the nonprofit, board members, stakeholders out in the community, and existing major gift donors. Usually that's a general pool. Maybe possible some prospects, but everyone on that campaign committee, even staff, should be able to make a gift to that campaign. So everyone on that committee, that's one thing you want to think about. Can those individuals make a gift to this campaign? That would be one of the key things. And then they help you implement the campaign over the 3 to 5 years. So what's a feasibility study? At its heart, a feasibility study is simply saying, do I have everything in place to make this work? That's what the feasibility study is going to ask. In general, it's not completed by one of the staff at the nonprofit. It can be, but in general, if you have the resources, it's considered best practices to hire a consultant to do that, because then they do a neutral evaluation and give you a neutral response on whether you are ready for that capital campaign. So some things that a feasibility study does in determining whether is this effort feasible, will it be on a path to success, will do things like hold conversations with your nonprofit leaders, with your board, with your key donors, with other stakeholders, and even potential prospects or potential major gift donors. It might even just meet with some community leaders to say, what do you know of this nonprofit? Would you think if they're going to try and raise, let's say, $5 million to build a new building, right? And they might say, let's say you're a museum, and the community leader might say, well, I'm a little concerned right now because 2 other museums in our region are right now in a campaign. So now might not be the best time, right? So sometimes community members give you that kind of feedback. In general, what do you learn in a feasibility study as the nonprofit? You learn if there is the support in the community, right? You learn, is the community ready for this effort, right? This study, this feasibility study, is going to, again, gather these opinions, advice, and feedback about your organization, about the vision, the goals, sometimes even possible commitments. One secret little trick, don't tell people this, but one secret little trick about a feasibility study is it can be some prospect development work there, where you go to a potential prospect and say, if we do this, might you consider a gift? And if you were going to consider a gift, what range might it be in? Wink, wink, right? So you're also collecting some potential donor or major gift prospect data during this feasibility study. But we can sometimes keep that on, on the quiet, but sometimes it does fulfill that. One thing you also need during this planning stage is a case statement. Everyone has heard this, the case for support for the campaign. What is a case statement? It's simply a written document. Sometimes it's a brochure, it's a pamphlet, it's on your website. It's the vision, purpose, dollar goal, maybe not the dollar goal, but maybe the vision, purpose, and the impact of this fundraising effort. That's going to be in the case statement. In a sense, it's going to answer the W questions: who, what, where, when, why, how, right, of your vision. I have seen a campaign case statement. Well, we'll let the organization remain nameless, but it was basically, we're in a campaign, so we need you to give money. And we need you to give money because we're in a campaign. And we're in a campaign because we need money, right? The whole brochure did this circular reasoning. We're never actually articulated the vision. And I will say that campaign ended up struggling and not succeeding in this Arkansas region. So be very mindful of that. I love this handout. I did not write this case for support white paper, but I think it's very, again, I don't know Mullen, Watkins, and Brandt at all. It is just a wonderful resource online that I found through Candid. As you guys know, I'm a huge Candid supporter as well, just because of my own fundraising activity over the years. But this is a great guide to help us write case statements. And it's taking it through, if you notice, it's taking us through these W questions, right? Who are we? What are we doing? Why is this important? What is our vision? How do we plan to achieve this vision? What do we need to succeed? This is so key when you're planning a fundraising campaign for that vision. How much money do you need to accomplish that goal, to accomplish that transformational moment in the community, right? How will we get this? How will we do these things, right? Will we renovate? Are we going to buy new property? So forth. How are we going to enact this vision, right? And what difference will it make, right? What difference in the end with your constituency, with the groups that you serve? What difference in your mission is this campaign going to make? So keep that in mind. Do track down this case for support white paper guide. It's free, it's online, and it is really helpful. Okay, so that's basically some of the planning. If you're hanging with us live today, if you have some planning questions, just put in chat and we will get to all of those planning questions at the end of our session today. Now let's talk about the quiet phase. The quiet, right? I jokingly said the quiet phase. So we call this a quiet phase, right? We're not publicly telling everyone we're in a capital campaign yet. It lasts from 6 months to possibly 2 years, depending upon how you're going. I've seen quiet phases last as long as 3 years. So let's talk about, what is this quiet phase where you're doing all of this fundraising work, but behind the scenes with that key stakeholder group, right? So in general, in this quiet phase, this is when you're going to develop those brochure materials. This is when you're going to decide, what am I going to print? What am I going to put up on the web? What's maybe my theme going to look like? What logos am I going to use for this campaign? So forth, so forth, so forth, right? The marketing materials that support your campaign. In this quiet phase, you're also going to complete that donor research. So you're going to keep calling your donor database, right? Looking for those hidden possible major gift prospects within your existing donor base you may just not know about. That's where you're going to complete the donor research during this time, trying to identify major gift donors that are already connected to your organization. The quiet phase is also when you're going to begin these key solicitations. You're going to, in a sense, start with that, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit. Some people will use that metaphor, but gifts from people you already have that strong relationship with. These are people who are ready to give. They might be people you interviewed during your feasibility study. Right? Wink, wink. Remember, we talked about secret there. It may be board members, maybe former board members. It may be stakeholders. It may be people who have been giving you maybe $1,000 a year in your annual fund giving society, that leadership giving society we talked about during annual fundraising, right? It's when we really begin the key major gift solicitations with our closest supporters. It's also where we begin the major gift cycle with our new identified prospects. So these new identified prospects, again, they are people who have already made gifts to us. They've already volunteered. Maybe they've already served on our board and they have potential to give, but we haven't worked with them in the major gift cycle yet. Since we have, right, in general, 18 to 24 months to develop major gifts, you see putting someone in the major gift cycle during this quiet phase will begin developing that relationship. So by the end of the campaign, the end of that 3, 5, 6-year period, that prospect becomes a major gift donor for you. And then here's one of the keys. The number can vary a little bit, but in general, the goal is to raise at least half your money during the silent phase. At least have this money before you totally publicly announce that you're raising money. You want to make sure you secure 50 to 75%. I've seen it, I want to say back in the day when I first started fundraising, it was 50%. Nowadays, people are leaning more towards the 65, 75% raised. So if your goal is to raise $10 million for your museum to build a new building, you want to make sure you secure 7.5 million of that prior to announcing the campaign publicly, right? So you would do that during this quiet phase, sometimes called the silent phase of the campaign, right? Just to keep that in mind. And where, again, just this is our pyramid of donors. We've talked about this in annual giving. We've talked about this during major gift prospect giving in that seminar. And we talked about this during plan giving, that plan giving seminar, right? Our pyramid of donors. A capital campaign is going to, here, let me see if I can pull up my little tools here. A capital campaign during the silent phase is going to start with our top pyramid of donors, right? People who have already have a commitment and have a capacity to give to us, right? This is that core constituency. And again, if you remember from our major gift presentation, this constituency is sometimes called the 10% who give 90, meaning they're 10% of your donors, but they're going to give you 90% of your money. So just keep that in mind. And when you're thinking of major gift giving during the silent phase. Okay. So again, just to remind you why donors give, because you know I love my formulas. Donors give because they have it in their heart. They have it in their pocketbook. And then here's the role of the fundraiser or the board member or the nonprofit leader. Because they're asked. We need all three of these things to solicit that campaign gift. Just keep that in mind. We need all three of these things. Okay, so now let's imagine we've raised that $7.5 million to building our new building, and we are ready for the public announcement. People call this the kickoff, right? The kickoff, and as my husband likes to say, it's like a parade. It's like the beginning of the parade. It's the fanfare, it's the balloons, it's the band, it's the big brass band, right? With not just 76 trombones walking down the street, with 176 trombones in the big parade, right? We'll make it even bigger. It is your kickoff moment. It's your wow. It's a time to cause energy and excitement and really, really get all of that synergy going to then publicly finish out this campaign. So a kickoff is the public announcement of your fundraising effort. It involves press releases, media appearances, usually some sort of big event like that parade with your stakeholders where you publicly announce your dollar goal and you report the progress you've made. So you'll say, we're raising that $10 million to build this new building. And guess what? We raised $7.9 million. Cheers and gets all excited, right? That's the moment. It's the big event with your stakeholders. It's also an opportunity to recognize leaders and donors, right? Leaders and donors and volunteers, those stakeholders who have been working with you now for possibly up to 3 years, right? It's a moment of acknowledgement there. It's also as a time for staff before the kickoff, right? To take a step back, revisit your plan, right? We don't want to revisit our vision. That was solidified. We might need to do some deeper prospect mining, right? Some deeper prospect work, some additional cultivation and so forth. But it is a time to reevaluate our plan Make sure the plan that has taken us up to this point is its most powerful. And has there been any changes in those 3 to 5 years? As we know, as we're living in interesting times, look at what's happened over these last 5 years. Right? I know an organization that kicked off their public phase of their capital campaign in the fall of 2019. Nothing that the organization could do about that coming pandemic, right? You just don't know what's going to happen. So this public moment is a good time just to think about, do we need to make any changes in our plans? Do we need to extend a year? Maybe are we doing so well you need to end early, right? There's all kind of good things to think about there. So it's a good time to make those plan adjustments. The kickoff is usually, just the 3 months. Maybe you're working on those 3 months, you're getting ready for the kickoff, you have it, and now we're in the public phase. This is when we are asking the public in general to join us in helping us reach our goal. We might be reaching out to new constituents. We might be reaching out to people who have been mid-range supporters, right? So we're going to continue that major gift work with those people we moved into the major gift prospect cycle at the beginning of our silent phase. We're going to maybe focus on those mid-range or newer donors. It's also a huge time to have very active social media and communication planning. So really a huge time to do marketing and PR, media appearance, maybe some additional events or activities. Might be a great time to have a groundbreaking if you've raised 75% of that money for that new building. The public phase, a great time to have that stakeholder community gather, those donors gather and break that ground and so forth. And in general, the public phase lasts somewhere between 6 months to the end of your effort, depending upon that timeline that you set at the beginning of your campaign planning. And of course, we want to make sure we complete and follow up with our campaign. We want to make sure, of course, we thank all of our donors. But not just that, we want to make sure that we continue with stewardship. Remember, stewardship is that phase in the major gift cycle when we're continuing to engage, continue to thank that person that gives, right, who has made a commitment. This is especially important in capital campaigns because, again, most campaigns, people make a large gift payable over several years. So maybe they're going to give you $25,000. $5,000 a year for 5 years. You want to continue to steward during those 5 years, right? Continue to build that relationship, to continue to engage while you collect these pledges. Again, if you haven't done something like a groundbreaking, now's an additional time to acknowledge gifts through small celebrations or activities or events like that groundbreaking. It might be a nice time, let's say if you are accepting planned gifts, might be a nice time to have a planned giving luncheon where you bring everyone together and thank them for their planned commitment to our comprehensive campaign. That's what we're doing, counting those planned gifts. It's a time to create reports for our stakeholders, right? As nonprofit staff, as the nonprofit leader or a fundraiser for a small nonprofit. It's the time that we do our reports. We look at where did we succeed? What were our strengths? Where might we need to strengthen again if we do this again? So forth. Who are results? What's the type of donor who made a gift? What kinds of gifts did we get? That kind of reporting for not just our fellow nonprofit stakeholders, but for, of course, our board and internally for the rest of the nonprofit leadership team. And of course, it is a great time to thank all of our volunteers. Many of our volunteers at the end of a campaign have stuck with you for 3 to 5 years. They need some extra TLC, some extra love to really let them know that this matters. And of course, it's a great time to celebrate, right? We throw the confetti, we're done. Though in general, you don't have an event ending the campaign. This is always very interesting. Typically, at the end of a campaign, it's kind of winding down, it's kind of closing out. You might have an official announcement that it's over, but there isn't usually a large party afterward. That's maybe interesting, maybe something we could think about, but some places do have an event ending the campaign officially. Some just kind of end it and then thank everyone involved. It's not the same fanfare as the big public kickoff though. This is separate. This is not about the campaign stages itself, but one of the best practice standards that you will see when you do a lot of Googling is that nonprofits should hire a consultant to help them with your capital campaign. This is something each nonprofit has to think of on their own. You might have a fundraiser who's really good. So then why would you need a consultant? One of the leading ideas behind hiring consultants with your campaign is that it continues to provide that neutral, objective evaluation of where you're going. How are you doing? Where are you going? Where can you improve? Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are your threats? A consultant who is more neutral can come in and give you sometimes that direct advice. So if you have the resources, if you have budgeted for some campaign administration, this is a good place to do it. Now, these are some of the more leading national consultants in the country right now. I'm not endorsing any of them. I'm just letting you know there's some of the bigger ones out there. There are also a lot of regional Arkansas folks who do some great consulting for capital campaigns. So if you want to know someone locally, reach out to me. My email's always at the end of this contact information. We can talk about some folks that I know personally that I think have done really good jobs for organizations. But again, that hiring a consultant, if you have the resources, do it. But know that consultants are not cheap. They're very expensive. They're very expensive. So you want to keep that in mind. Again, because campaigns can seem overwhelming, I want to bring it just basic down to our formula again. Right now, remember, this is not out there online. This is Mary Ellen's mind working here and how I explain the successful capital campaign. But in my mind's eye, again, this is the formula for successful campaign. We have our vision that is mission centered, designed by our nonprofit leader, and has buy-in for our board from our board, right? Then we have our donor constituency. We have an existing group of donors who have the resources to support the dollars needed to fulfill that vision. Then we have the action plan. The action plan is typically done by the assigned fundraiser or development officer, or if you're a small shop, then by a staff member. And these things combined, the vision, the existing constituency, and the action plan, that is what leads to the successful capital campaign. So again, just a few takeaways. I know we went through a lot of this stuff quickly. Capital campaigns can really seem overwhelming, but no, these slides, of course, are always available via the PDFs. We just, again, touched on the basics today. We want to keep that fun and fundraising. Campaigns over 3 to 5 years, right? They can be a long effort, right? Sometimes campaigns can be a lot of extra work for a nonprofit. So we want to keep the fun in there if we can, because the fun is what's going to keep that synergy, or keep that energy, keep that momentum. And of course, we want to encourage everyone to join us for our last session, which is going to be about building strong foundation boards. So how do we, as small to mid-sized humanities nonprofits, build a foundation board that supports or really understands all of this kind of fundraising we've been talking about? Our overview, our annual giving, our major giving, our planned giving, our corporate and foundation giving, our grant writing, and then this capital campaign. So please join us next time for an in-depth session about how to build that strong fundraising community board that will help advance your fundraising efforts. Again, it's Mary Ellen, your friendly neighborhood fundraiser. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you one last time.